Should we get started with the CAD and its incredible strength just because of the Bank of Canada turning hawkish? I understand that you've been long G10 petro currencies anyways. Give us your outlook.
Yeah, look, I think not so surprising given the fact that BOC has now set the trend, which is the first step towards normalization away from some of these extraordinary and historically large stimulus that was delivered during the pandemic. So yeah, they tapered, and not only that, but they also kind of pulled in their expectations of when the output gap will be closed, and that's when expectations are when the first hike will be. So they're definitely in pole position, and this is a year where I think rather unexpectedly the topic of divergence of policy, who will be going first, who may be tapering, who may be actually delivering more stimulus. That's come into focus for FX markets, and it's really driving relative currency performance.
Given that we continue to expect, at least from the Federal Reserve, saying that they will continue to help the economy, to support the economy, this GTV chart on the Bloomberg showing how the dollar is now below all of its major moving day averages. Does that mean that the downward trend will continue?
Yeah, look, I think the U.S. dollar and the Fed is an interesting one. If the focus is on who's going to be next to exit out of policy, we think actually for the Fed, the topic of tapering will come up formally in their communication quite soon. We think in the June FOMC, and we think perhaps as early as the April FOMC minutes, that kind of discussion will be there. So I think that will be a topic of focus. Now, as you said, the dollar has kind of given back some of its gains, some of its impressive gains that we saw in the first quarter. First quarter was really about kind of pricing in U.S. exceptionalism, seeing that reflected in a backup in yields, and that backup in yields driving the dollar quite a bit stronger. We've seen a pullback of that since the beginning of this quarter in the last couple of weeks. We think this is just a temporary consolidation. We do see that the U.S. exceptionalism story, driven by very, very large fiscal stimulus, we think that that is a durable theme. We think yields will resume higher, and therefore we think that the dollar will still be well supported, particularly against other low-yielding peers.
What about differentials when you look at dollar Aussie and dollar Kiwi then?
Well, so Aussie and Kiwi, they have been two countries where the rates markets repricing has been quite large as well. But in the Antipodeans, this is one place where our economists think that perhaps markets got a little too excited about what might come in terms of policy normalization. If anything, we think that the risks are to the downside in terms of kind of those rate prices or that rate pricing maybe scaling back a little bit and then causing a bit of weakness in the Aussie and Kiwi.
So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the digital yuan and how much we could see this have a meaningful effect globally.
Yeah, look, obviously, especially with the move in Bitcoin, Dogecoin, if you will, that's generated a lot of attention. I think for central banks, this is still a very medium-term issue. I think cryptocurrencies in the core financial system and how we traditionally think and use currencies, it's still very much at the margins. This is obviously something that will gain a lot of attention, but I think to the effect that it actually impacts how traditional currencies perform and behave, I think that's still driven by kind of the traditional factors, macro, monetary policy. I think it's still on the margins. Obviously important to watch, but not really factoring into how we are thinking about forecasting or trading the traditional currencies.
Daniel, JPMorgan has just called the yuan overvalued. Of course, we had seen significant strength, but a little bit of more weakness recently. Explain to us this call and where it's headed, especially with dollar weakness recently.
Yeah, again, we think that this dollar weakness is temporary. We think that the rise in yields, in U.S. yields, will resume as a major factor for markets. I think this will be a challenge. So higher U.S. yields, I think, will be a bit of a challenge for dollar CNY. Dollar CNY, the renminbi obviously having been a very strong currency, we have shifted our view on that. Our forecasts are kind of in the medium term flat from here. We have a year-end forecast of 650. We think that there could be some renminbi weakness in the near term. We see some of the drivers that was pushing renminbi strength earlier, kind of the Chinese exceptionalism in terms of how fast they kind of exited out of the pandemic last year, strong bond inflows, those factors seem to be fading away. We think that there might be more PBOC resistance to more renminbi strength on a kind of a basket CFET basis. So all of those factors together combined, we think, mean that the best of the best days for the renminbi are probably behind us.